Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Aaron Sofer. I'm an associate attorney here with Anderson Business Advisors, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CBD and the 2018 Farm Bill. Now, before I get into anything substantive, of course, being an attorney, I got to give you my disclaimer. Nothing's intended to be legal advice specific for your situation. So when it comes to your specific situation, I ask that you give us a call, arrange some sort of consultation, and we will take a look at your unique facts and circumstances and get you a solution that fits your needs. Now, as the title implies, CBD. Well, what is that? To those that are uninformed, have no idea, maybe you've heard something floating out on the internet about how cool and new CBD is, how amazing it is. Well, let's go over exactly what CBD consists of. CBD stands for cannabidiol, okay? And that is a chemical compound derived from the cannabis plant. Yes, that same cannabis plant that they were smoking back in Woodstock, and now over 33 states in the United States have legislation allowing for some sort of marijuana usage. That same plant. Now, for those of you that weren't familiar with my description, there's a nice little picture of it for you. That is the cannabis plant. Now, when we're going to be discussing, there's many parts of the cannabis plant. So the genus is cannabis up here at the top. There's two strains, sativa and indica. Today, we are going to be talking about this one specific strain down here called hemp. Okay. The hemp strain has 0 or close to 0 THC in it. THC is what gets you high. Hemp or industrial hemp contains, again, very little THC and high concentrations of CBD, the cannabidiol. So with hemp-derived CBD, as I mentioned, not going to get you high, and it's known to relieve pain, anxiety, and nausea. Now, mind you, these statements have not been filtered or studied by the FDA, although the FDA, as we'll get into in a few minutes, is in charge currently of overseeing CBD and industrial hemp. There already are some FDA-approved drugs out there, one of them being Epidiolex, that already contains CBD. So as slow as the government moves in everything, in every aspect that they do, the legislation is slowly starting to catch up. Now, mind you, for those of you, you may live in a jurisdiction where your state allows for the consumption of marijuana, again, marijuana being a part of the cannabis plant. Still, federal legislation is lacking on the marijuana side, but at least on the hemp side and hemp-derived CBD, the legislation is slowly starting to catch up to the actual practical uses of that part of the plant. Some of the applications of CBD and CBD-infused products, you've got candies, coffees, creams, lubricants, the list goes on. I mean, just do a simple Google search for CBD-infused products, and the list is numerous. Now, the cannabis plant, in general, it's been around for quite some time. Even as far back as in the mid-1500s, King Henry required that a portion of every single plantation, at least a quarter acre, must be set aside for cannabis use. For cannabis production and cultivation. And it wasn't until the 1930s where the Marijuana Tax Act, that was the first federal legislation that took aim at the use of marijuana. And then in the 1970s, you had the Controlled Substances Act, which really put the brakes on any usage of the cannabis plant. Now, I mentioned the Controlled Substances Act, that for the last almost 50 years has been what has been prohibiting the use of hemp. Okay, remember, hemp is just one strain of the cannabis plant. Hemp, again, contains little to no THC. Hemp will not get you high. There have been practical uses of hemp making rope, soap, clothing, you name it. Hemp has been used to make those products, okay? Now, as it relates to the Controlled Substances Act, there are 5 schedules, and Schedule 1 being the most restrictive. Schedule 1 drugs listed on the Controlled Substances Act have, according to federal legislation, have little to no medical use. There's a lack of accepted safety of the use of the drug, and there's a high potential for abuse. Again, that is what federal law says about Schedule 1 drugs. Mind you, marijuana is still listed as a Schedule 1 drug, as is cocaine, ecstasy, and various other hardcore substances. So, by virtue of marijuana, or prior to the federal 2018 Farm Bill, hemp was lumped in with marijuana on that Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. Okay, so in conjunction with it being listed on that, again, those even that were engaged in the production of hemp, they had severe restrictions on what they were able to do with this very versatile plant. Now, as it relates to the 2018 Farm Bill, this is the actual text of the Farm Bill. The legal name is actually the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018. And then the very last section of the 2018 Farm Bill is the one that essentially removes hemp from being lumped together with marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act. So what does that actually mean in a practical sense? So if hemp-derived CBD is produced in a manner consistent with how it's laid out in the bill, then it will be legal. Mind you how I stated that. If the production of CBD and hemp in general is in conformance with how it's laid out in the bill, then it's legal. It's not just a blanket statement saying, oh, now it's a free-for-all, all hemp, all CBD is now legal. Again, it must be produced in conformance with the bill. And the bill stipulates that for a state to establish its own program, it must submit a plan through the Department of Agriculture, the USDA. Now, for those states that wish to not set forth their own plan for how to legislate and regulate the production of hemp in their state, the USDA will set forth their own regulations. And so, for example, let's say you live in a state that, again, doesn't set forth their state-specific regulations. You can apply for a federal license to then be able to grow hemp in accordance with federal law. Now, as I mentioned, 33 states already have some sort of marijuana legislation. That legislation is going to be considered wholly separate from this legislation as set forth in the 2018 Farm Bill. Again, the USDA, they have yet to have released the regulations for how to go about actually getting licensed through them. But hopefully in the coming months, it will be released, and those that are interested in growing their own hemp and thereby CBD can do so under federal regulation. Now, hemp, CBD, it's a vast segment of the cannabis industry. Mind you, marijuana is going to gobble up the majority of the growth in that area. However, that is not to say that there is not growth potential with CBD and hemp. This is a very conservative estimate set forth on this chart, stating that it's going to be a $1.9 billion industry by the year 2022. Again, conservative estimate. I've read other estimates that's going to put the hemp market, industrial hemp market, at closer to $22 billion by 2022. Now, for those of you that are intrigued by the growth potential with this plant, along with the plant with hemp being descheduled, taken off that controlled substances list as a Schedule 1 drug, now those of you who were previously precluded from taking your tax deductions in light of Internal Revenue Code Provision 280E, which prescribed that expenditures in connection with the illegal sale of drugs And I'll go ahead and read that for those of you who the text might be a little small for your eyes on the screen. It states, no deduction or credit shall be allowed for any amount paid or incurred during the taxable year in carrying on a trade or business if such trade or business consists of trafficking in controlled substances. Okay, so like I just mentioned, previously you had hemp and hemp, which includes CBD, listed on your Schedule 1 narcotic substance list. So therefore you weren't able to take ordinary and necessary business deductions in your business. Now, in light of the fact that the Farm Bill has now taken hemp off of the Schedule 1 substance list, now you will in fact be able to take all those ordinary and necessary business deductions. So now that hemp has been taken off that Schedule 1 list, DEA is still going to keep a little bit of oversight over the cultivation and production of the hemp plant. However, most of the regulation is now going to be delegated to the Food and Drug Administration. Okay. The Food and Drug Administration, in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the USDA is going to oversee more of the industrial applications of hemp. So you've got the Food and Drug Administration overseeing more of the consumption, human consumption, or human and livestock consumption of hemp, and therefore hemp-derived CBD, whereas the USDA will theoretically just maintain oversight over the industrial uses of the plant. And again, this is all speculation. We only have some certain statements that have been given by the commissioner of the USDA and the other federal agencies in light of the fact that the 2018 Farm Bill is only about a month old. So, with the FDA oversight over CBD and hemp, it still bears to keep in mind that simply because CBD is now not illegal, that doesn't necessarily mean that all forms of CBD are in fact legal. So under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, it stipulates that anytime you introduce into interstate commerce any food, and included in food is drink, to which has been added a substance, so in this case CBD, which is an active ingredient in a drug product. So we already know that the FDA is overseeing several prescription drugs that contain CBD, so CBD definitely falls under that definition. A drug which has substantial clinical investigations have been instituted and for which the existence of such investigations has been made public. So essentially what this is saying is if a specific drug falls under the purvey of the FDA, it is going to have to adhere to all of the regulations that are set forth by the FDA and its commissioner. Now, like I said at the beginning, if you were to Google CBD-infused products, you're going to see a vast list of all different types of creams, sodas, pills, tinctures, you name it, that are going to be infused with the actual substance, CBD, which has that anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety properties. Now, simply because they are listed for sale, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are in fact 100% legal under federal law. Now, the FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, has made a comment that they realize there is tremendous public outcry and interest in getting these types of products legalized in an expedient manner. And so how the FDA has been, in large part, administering and overseeing hemp and CBD-derived products is that so long as the product itself is not touting any medicinal benefits, in large part, the FDA is going to look away. And again, in doing so, this is evidence of the larger sentiment at the FDA that they are in lockstep, more or less, with consumers at large in allowing for the widespread use of CBD-infused products. So, in summary, hemp is not marijuana. Hemp has been descheduled from the Controlled Substances Act, and therefore allows for those tax benefits, those tax deductions, which I previously mentioned. And also very importantly, hemp producers, hemp cultivators can now get federal crop insurance as well, which they're previously precluded from doing since, again, before hemp was lumped together with marijuana under the Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. And then hemp-derived CBD-infused food is still illegal. Now, for those of you that are watching and are thinking, all right, well, you know, the tremendous potential, you said on the low end, it's going to be a $1.9 billion industry by 2022. On the high end, it's going to be upwards of a $20 billion industry by 2022. How do I get involved? I want to go grow my own hemp now. So you can do so. However, we have to first wait for the USDA to release the regulations and the licensing procedures on how to do so from a federal standpoint. Now, once they do, what you'll want to do is take acquisition, take ownership, take title to the actual real estate where you're going to be growing the hemp in its own LLC. And again, for those of you that are already clients of Anderson, this whole structure will sound a little familiar, where we're going to use multiple entities to bifurcate the liability that you may accrue in engaging in any ongoing business. So on this end, you've got the property owning LLC that is going to take title to the property itself. We've got a little farmhouse right here, and then these are our crops. This is our hemp. I'm quite impressed with my art skills. So then, again, you're going to take title to that property in its own LLC, and then you're going to have another LLC that's going to act as the active business. Now, that active business side, that's where you're going to hire your employees, potentially have your storefront. So here's your commercial building with your storefront. And as I mentioned, you'll hire your employees through here. And so ideally, this entity will be taxed as an S corporation. What that will allow you to do is take advantage of some preferential tax treatment, and it'll save you 15.3% self-employment tax on a good portion of the income that you do generate from the active business. And now, how these two businesses will act in conjunction with one another, they'll both be owned by you, the taxpayer, and there will be a lease agreement that'll be executed between your two entities. Again, this is so you have all your documentation in place, so as to solidify the fact that these are two separate businesses, and therefore, if you get a lawsuit over here, it's going to act as a barrier right here, and this lawsuit will not be able to penetrate the LLC and therefore the real property holding of you, the ultimate beneficial owner down here. Now, I realize what I've said might be confusing to some of you. For those of you that want to talk about this strategy or any other strategy similarly situated, the number's up on the screen, and you can reach us at the web address at the bottom. Again, my name is Aaron Sofer, Associate Attorney with Anderson Business Advisors, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.